our biggest challenge in the early going was what to call AMLI. I was a proponent of Ginkgo Realty. I was always the landscaping guy. John was adamant he'd quit. He said he wouldn't even start if it was Ginkgo Realty. He wanted nothing to do with Ginkgo, even though I pointed out that Ginkgo was the only tree that had both a male and female tree, and it was the oldest tree living and dated back to way before the dinosaurs. That did not sway John, and he was adamant. So John came up with Alan Mutt's Life Investors, but it took him forever to come up with the right. We were Lima Beans for a while, L-I-M-A. We had all these different things. Mali, we were an African nation, Mali, M-A-L-I. We had all these different versions of the letters that formed Alan Mutt's and Life Investors. Finally, and I was kind of the school that AMLI was a nonsense name, and I had great foresight because I figured we would be mistaken for Amway, the detergents door-to-door salespeople over in Ada, Michigan, and for the longest time we were always, do you sell soap? And so we had to contend with the confusion between AMLI and Amway. John prevailed as usual, and bingo, we started AMLI in December of 1980.
Well, traveling with you was always a daunting task, as well as John Allen, because Alan and John both needed to eat right at noon and right at 6 p.m. And otherwise they would start whimpering or whining in the car seat.
The term was be disagreeable.
It was like having a 5-year-old child, whimpering, can't we stop? And so we would literally have to go through some drive-through. It was always cheap, just anything would satisfy you, but we had to do it. And it was always a game to see how long we could go and tolerate the whimpering and whining in the back seat well into the afternoon.
And that's why I was closest to John and not quite so close with either Phil or Greg.
The very few people can go out and raise $11 million with friends and family, that kind of.
To buy raw land on the outskirts of Chicago that was really following in the prototype of Alville that had preceded it, where you just bought the land and trust us, we know what we're going to do with it after we buy it, but we don't have a clue today. We're not telling you what we're going to do, we'll just figure out something. And that made it a very, very difficult raise to get to the 11 million. And I distinctly remember when we finally got there and literally every person we knew or thought we knew had been called on to invest. I looked at Greg, I looked at Phil, and I said, we don't have any more friends or family. We cannot raise any more money through syndicates. We were at the end of the line.
Alan did. He clearly came in and said, boys, this is it. We cannot call. I cannot call a single human being. No one will talk to me.
I remember talking with my dad and my brother. They were aware that I had quit practicing law and joined AMLI, and they had been loyal family members and invested in AMLI's first couple of deals. And my dad said to me in 1988, he said, Alan, you got to go back to the law firm. I'm broke. I have no more money to put in AMLI deals. And he was serious.
And my dad, my mother-in-law, so we had truly milked every single relationship we had.
The secret to being a good investor is putting your dad and your mother-in-law in every deal. There's no question that puts a lot of importance in the decisions you make, and it helped us all through our early syndication days.
There is no doubt when we started, we viewed every dollar as our own dollar, and we husband our capital and our expenses better than any company I can imagine. I don't know, we had a rule at AMLI that lasted, I think, through from 1981 through going public in 94, where you could not travel with another person, I mean, unless it was a male, female. If you travel with another person of the same sex, you had to at least 2 to a room, and oftentimes we had 3 to a room where we take the mattress off the bed, and you could have somebody sleep on. And I didn't mind the box springs. I always took the box springs because I didn't mind it. And that was just extraordinary how we could stretch a buck.
Every week for how many years? 6 years. Alan would would go to the airport here at O'Hare, fly down to Atlanta, and he would usually always on the same flight. And he'd get there late afternoon in Atlanta, and he'd go to the Wendy's in Concourse A, and would engage the same salesperson at Wendy's, Terrence, right?
Terrence.
And would order one of the value meals that had a hamburger, and you got a side order. You could choose chili or a baked potato. So Alan, because the chili was 20 cents more than the baked potato, he would add the chili as his side order, but then order another baked potato too to save the 20 cents. So
all this
thank
is true.
God for
This happens to be true. And Terrence became such a good friend of mine, and we became so close that after 4 years, I got the Wendy's employee discount when I ordered an extra 10% off my $11 meal.
It's very hard to describe John accurately for posterity, but he had a magical ability to solve problems. That was his fundamental strength. Plus, as Phil alluded to earlier, he had an impeccable ethical grounding. I mean, people trusted him. Anybody that knew John would do deals with John on a handshake.
He was incredibly productive with the time that he spent working. And 8 hours from John equated to 80 hours from me. He got things done.
You look at the four of us, we just blended very well, and it's just incredible. We're now 37 years into AMLI, and John's been gone now for what, 4? He died in, I think, 13, maybe 12, 13. He's been gone, but it was a great partnership, and it's worked out well.